And thanks a lot for joining, guys. There's a few of you there. Not a huge crowd today. I think today is MLK Day in the United States, so that might, keep some of the Americans away. But we usually have a few stragglers that join us later anyway. But we have a few of us, so yeah, it's good to get back on the webinar series. I'm going to keep today's one pretty brief, just to warm up for the new year. I'm going to talk a little bit about version 7.3 and what it brought us. There's one specific issue I want to talk about, but the new features are pretty awesome. So really, without a delay, I'm going to get straight into it, if that's okay for you guys. I'm going to keep an eye on the attendance participants as well, see if anybody else pops in. All right. So as I said, 7.3 was released just a couple of weeks back. You might have noticed a brand new color and brand and stuff like that. I might talk a little bit about that towards the end. I am aiming for about 45 minutes maximum today. So hopefully that suits you guys as well. A couple of things on housekeeping. We are recording today. If you have any questions, ask away. No issues as usual. I will share the recording and the presentation afterwards. Also, there will be references to various documents and things throughout the presentation too. And you are on mute, so if you do want to, Zoom is popping up things in me here. If you do want to speak, just unmute. Just give me a hands up or whatever. No issues. I'll be watching the attendance list for anybody that wants to join in. Okay. Perfect. Great. As I said, just keep going. So as I said, brand new brand, brand new colors, brand new me. I look way better in that picture than I do on video. But little sneak peek on the lower right-hand side. I'm going to touch on V8 ever so slightly towards the end of the webinar, ever so slightly. So hold on for that one. That's a special one. Okay. Getting through the animations and onto the next slide. Okay. So really, without wasting much time, I'm going to get straight into today's demo. There was a couple of important updates in version 7.3, which I want to touch on. Today, I'm going to demo the SNMP properties feature and the configuration properties feature. I think you'll really like it. The use cases are really, really important for customers. So hopefully you guys will find benefit from it. And pretty easy to set up, pretty easy to get going. And there's a couple of other, and you'll see the URL at the bottom of this page. This is an extract from the 7.3 changelog. 7.3.1 will come out next week with a couple of enhancements, mostly around our new product Vector, which is our distributed agent. There's one particular one I want to call out on the timeout, on the qprod timeout value, that second star there. The .env file that was shipped by default for a long time had a low Q timeout on it. So you'll see it right here. And double check the knowledge base. There's an alert right up there on the login on the customer portal. And if your Q timeout value is kind of low, you should be looking to up or increase that value. A few jobs that are maybe all of a sudden are prematurely not working or failing on you, we need to check that value. So head over to the customer portal, check the banner at the top, and make sure that your production queue timeout value is significantly higher than 120 seconds. I just want to call that one out. Just go have a look after the webinar. Send me an email if you need to. There's no issues. So yeah, a lot of other things done. Just that last one as well. I keep reminding people because it's useful to know. We don't do tech debt at rConfig. We have no tech debt at rConfig, which means all of our dependent software, and we use dependencies, open source dependencies and different things, and we bring those in to the application. We update those on every release. There is no technical debt in rConfig, and there's no known security issues. Okay, perfect. Okay, the fun part. SNMP and config property use cases, the major features in 7.3.1. So why did we do this? I've always said rConfig doesn't want to be a network monitoring tool, but it seemed to make sense in line with enhancing rConfig's capabilities around firmware management that we start to go out to the network and not just retrieve configurations, but retrieve some metadata around the network device itself. So when we did that, then we were in discussions with a number of customers. SNMP on its own wasn't useful enough, that we needed to start extracting various values from configuration outputs themselves. Some of the use cases, some are obvious, some not so obvious. Firmware management is pretty obvious. The idea now that I can, from an inventory perspective, in my NCM, know where I am from an inventory, from a firmware management / inventory perspective across the entire inventory. That's useful. There will be more enhancements. We're kind of version 1 of these features at the moment, and I think as feedback comes to us, maybe you want to set your own safe harbor release. We will be integrating with CVE databases later in the year, and other features, but for now, at least we have visibility. Maybe you want to do inventory analysis, not just for firmware, but beyond firmware. Think serial numbers, think interfaces, think IP addresses. We're trying not to be a DCIM. Maybe augment some of those tools, maybe give you some of those capabilities if you don't already have them. Capacity and lifecycle planning, then when you have that data, and maybe some proactivity around compliance and audit. So there's just some of the use cases, right, that we'll talk about today. Right. Without further ado, I am going to open my development server, which I tested earlier today, and I know works. So hopefully the demo will go well, and you can freely ignore the error that pops up here in the top right-hand corner, because I know exactly what it is, and it's a development issue. All right, so standard rConfig interface. What we've got here, I'm going to focus on router 4 here for today's demo. It's empty, brand new device, kind of brand new setup. I'm just going to do a download and see what happens. So when I do a download now, you'll notice a couple of things right away. You're going to notice these 2 new buttons down here, SNMP polling groups and config properties. For the first 5 or 10 minutes, we're going to focus on SNMP polling groups. You're going to see config properties. We'll come back to that in a few minutes. Okay. So basically, when I do download, if I hit my refresh button, I get my 3 configs, my show version, show run, show clock. No issues. If I peek those, I have my outputs. That's exactly what I expect to see. No concerns. Something happened in the device details pane here. We got some new data. Okay, we got a whole bunch of new data. Now for this one, these are the config properties. I don't want to talk about those yet. I will in a few moments. What I'm going to say is we have this new feature that allows us to attach a device to an SNMP polling group, poll the device for OIDs that we define, retrieve those OIDs and add them to the device as dynamic properties that then display not just here, but also in an inventory report I'll show in a moment. Okay, so here's the kind of basic architecture. So let me start here. For a device to retrieve OID values or OID information, it needs to be attached to a group, okay? And a group, right now, I'm not going to attach this right now, but a group is simple. Conceptually, a group holds 2 things, a connection and OIDs that you want to back up. So you'll all know that when you connect to SNMP on V2, you'll need a community string. On V3, you'll need various authentication properties. So right in here, you can choose which connection. You can set up as many connections as you want, but a polling group can only have 1 connection, okay? You can create the connections here under SNMP connections, and you'll see you can swap between version 2 and version 3, okay? Once your connection is created, you'll then create a set of OIDs and attach those OIDs to a specific group. Then when you have that kind of set of data created, you'll attach the group to a device, okay? In this case, it's a Cisco ISR, so I'm going to attach. Now, I should say before I do attach it, if I download now and it's not attached to anything, it won't back anything up. It won't attempt to download an OID. It won't attempt to extract anything from SNMP. The second it's attached to a group, Let me save this. And if I do a download, so pre-version 7.3, when you were doing a download, it would just do SSH or Telnet, connect to those devices, pull in the configurations and save them. Now it's doing three things. It is doing what we just described, SSH, Telnet, store the output for each config. That's cool. The second thing it's doing, if it's attached to an SNMP polling group, it will, I'm going to pause. I have a couple more people joining in. So we're a few minutes in, and we are recording. So hopefully you guys will catch this afterwards, what you missed, but I continue on. So as I said, we are recording. So if you missed any at the start of the webinar, I'll share the recording link afterwards. But once the device is attached to an SNMP polling group and you click download now, it does the normal backup. Then it attempts to connect using the SNMP polling group connection and extract the values and save them. And it does a config property extraction as well. So it does new things on the one download job. So let's do a download now and let's see what happens. I am going to open the queue manager as well, just for a look under the hood, as the Americans would say. And what we'll notice is we'll notice the download job and we'll notice the SNMP device polling job, all part of device ID 1004, okay? The config property extraction jobs I'll talk about in a few moments. If I come back here and I do a refresh, I got my config backups, no issues there, but now I have these two new data properties on the device, okay? And only two, I have three actually presently, and the model, the firmware, and the serial, okay? Just jumping back to the OIDs for a moment, you'll notice, sorry, what device did I click? Version 3 there. Serial, yeah, that's correct. I'm just checking something as part of my demo. Oh, it is there. Okay, fine. No issues. Okay, let me catch a breath and then say, so we got three values back. These are completely dynamic. Whatever you set as part of the OIDs for the polling group, I edit this, they're the values that are retrieved. Okay, in this case, I have model, firmware, and serial. If I look in OIDs, I have model, firmware, and serial. One of the things you'll notice here is that serial and firmware have exactly the same OID. The key difference is that we're enabled to place a regular expression pattern as part of the settings for the second one. Same OID as the firmware, but now what we can do is extract specific values, because you guys know, right? SNMP is a bit tricky. You poll a device, you get some data, and it's like, I got too much data. And the example here is on router 4. I'll just zoom in here. I hope visually it's okay for you guys. On router 4, for firmware, for model, we got all of this data, but really, I'd like to have a separate field with just the serial. So if you know your regex or you use ChatGPT or anything like that, you can use a regex string and just extract the value you want, which is really useful and really powerful. So you can, of course, poll multiple OIDs, and then the other OIDs, you can use regular expression patterns to really extract data from into new fields. So again, where this is powerful is if I go to devices, I now have this new button called inventory report. I can do an export. I can download a CSV. Let me load this up on the other screen. Here we go. And now I can do an export of not just my kind of standard device inventory, but also all of the dynamic fields. And what's kind of cool about this report is, let's say some devices have some dynamic fields and other devices have other dynamic fields. It doesn't matter. It'll spit them all out. So you can slice and dice and do your filtering afterwards, okay? One of the things when I look at this report, I think to myself, some of the filtering capabilities would be really useful in the main user interface. I would 100% agree. And I'll talk about it a little bit when I talk about version 8 later. Okay, that's it. It's that simple. I think as with everything with rConfig, once we get feedback and people start to use it, I think that will improve over time. But actually, its current implementation is really that simple and really pleasant and easy to use. Okay. But then what happened was when we went out to customers and said, we're thinking about doing this, and firmware management's an important use case. And a few customers came back and said, SNMP is a little bit unreliable. One specific use case, the customer said HPE switches on certain firmware versions, when you hit the OID, it doesn't report the right firmware version, and it's a bug that HPE are aware of, and they won't fix it, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay. And there was a few other examples came back, and as an engineer myself back in the day, it's like, if I really want the source of truth for information on a device, where do I go? I go to the CLI. That's where I go. And so what we decided to do really quickly, actually, was kind of surprising how easy it was to build this, was to build a feature, a capability that would allow us to scan the configuration output and extract data from it and use that data as dynamic properties for the device. Okay? So that's what the second set of data is. A lot more, but that's just the way it's configured. It can be 1 or it can be 20. There's no limit to any of these, right? None whatsoever. And so that's what these other ones are, is basically a config extract from show run. Now, for those who know, and have spoken to me about various about rConfig backing up configuration and state. Config is just config, it's just text, right? So we can do extracts from our running configs, absolutely no problem. But we can also do our extracts from any other type of config we want. This is cool. So here's our other button. Now we can access SNMP polling groups from its own menu. That's useful. Configuration property is a little bit different though, and we see how feedback evolves on this. So we have a button here, that's fine. To access it kind of outside the device itself, you actually go to commands. And the reason we go to commands for configuration properties is because there's an intrinsic link between the config and what we're trying to extract. Let me demonstrate this. So again, new button here, config properties. Both of those buttons will bring it to the same place. And there's a table of configuration properties. And really, we use regular expression to define exactly what it is we're trying to get, but we're attaching it to a specific command output. If I give you an example here, if I just create a new property, put in my regular expression pattern, you're really selecting the command. So it can be any command in the system. What happens in the back end is when a configuration downloads, if I download a show run, show IP root, show access list, whatever it is, right? On the back of that download, a quick check will be made to see if a configuration property exists for that command. And if it does, a new job, let me just go into jobs here, is spawned. Okay, the config property extractor job. And then the actual extraction will take place. Now, it's a brand new job, a new job for every property. Why? Because not all configs are a couple of hundred lines long. Some are thousands, some are millions, and I have seen millions of lines of config, right? So it needs to spawn its own job just to do a parse of particularly large files. So that's fine. That's the back end. And so we have examples here of extracting the host name from the show run, extracting IP addresses. We've already seen real world examples of customers extracting multiple values, say all BGP peers. Okay, you might want to do that. And say access list entries, give me all access lists 101. It really depends on how creative you want to get with your regex patterns. We try not to support regex patterns specifically, we encourage you to look on the internet. ChatGPT is really useful. Here's a block of code. I'd like to extract these two things using regex. It's pretty good at giving you the exact patterns you need. But if you're stuck and you need some help, let us know. And so with these patterns, what they do then is they scan the output and extract the property value. So let me give you an example. Now, one of the extra things we did with configuration properties, not SNMP, you can actually debug SNMP live on the command line. There is an SNMP debug button here, which will pretty much do the same as the copy debug, except it's specific for SNMP. And you can run that in the command line. And a little bit like the config debug, it'll give you some troubleshooting and diagnostic information in case you run into any difficulty. For the config properties, troubleshooting and diagnostics is a little bit different, but quite slick, actually. If I click on a specific command, so we're focused on show runs at the moment, I can click on my config property test, brand new button up here, config property test. I can choose the config property that I set up, okay, whichever one it was that relates to this config, and click test. And so what that will give me real time, and it's evaluating literally against this particular config back here. Let me just run that again, host name. And so what it gives me real time is the property, the value, the property name, which you define in the config properties table, the value that was extracted using the regex, and any messages. So if the regex was wrong, or the property didn't exist, or some other error occurred, this is where you would find out, right? So it's kind of useful to build the config property, build a pattern, and then test it real time, kind of before you let it into production, as it were. Which then means when I do a download, the config job downloads the configurations. Now the other ones are happening so quickly. There's the SNMP polling job for 2004, and there's some of the various extraction jobs. Okay, so if I run back here and I do refresh, those configs are updated, our SNMP values updated, and our config properties are updated. So just one or two more things to mention on that, and then I'll open it up. Every time any of those properties are extracted, they're saved in a table, so for all of history. So let's say you do a backup on this device once a day. Every day, a new set of properties is saved for that device. Okay, they're the latest. What you're looking at here in this panel is the latest extracted from that table, but all of them for history are saved. I think what we'll see in future versions, because we're capturing that data, is the ability to look back in time, like when did that firmware version change, or when did that particular property change. So we have that data now. We'll just add something in maybe version 8 to be able to interrogate the kind of history. That's it really. As I said, the inventory, the ability to extract that data is in the inventory report now available. And we will add filters, a little bit like these, to version 8 to be able to filter on dynamic properties. That's it. They're the main features that I wanted to share today. Was there any questions or any thoughts on that just before I go on to one or two other things? And like, we can wrap up quickly enough today. There is actually, let me just share here real quickly. Let me share, because I probably should have done this at the top of the call. In Docs, under devices, device inventory, there's an overview. Basically explain what I just went through. It'll tell you how to set up SNMP polling. One of the important things to note, for SNMP specifically, PHP, which is the kind of language that we use to build our config, comes with various extensions. The SNMP extension was never part of our config. It now needs to be. So it is part of the update process, but in case you run into any difficulties, we do have an update script here for PHP, which will add it, just in case you run into any issues. Debugging is there, the whole process of adding it's all of the documentation is there, and similarly for configuration property parsing. Okay. So I want to wrap up on a couple of things, but before I do, any thoughts or questions on any of those? Feel free to unmute and jump in if there is any thoughts or feedback. Easy peasy? Like really easy? Okay, perfect. Okay, then to wrap up, and as I said, short enough webinar, like I'm booking an hour, but and that's kind of to talk about the next slide, and there's just one or two to go through. The whole series is based on kind of quick webinars, get in, show some things, but also get some updates like the Horizon Q issue that I talked about at the start of the call. There's a lot coming up in the next 2 months of webinars. I think I'm going to do one every 2 weeks. We're talking about configurations and device states next. Single source of truth on Vector for MSPs. Vector itself. So if you haven't heard of Vector, Vector is our new distributed agent. Phenomenal piece of software, really, which allows us to interrogate devices remote from rConfig. Okay, so as it stands and as it's always been, you could always only directly connect from rConfig to devices and back them up. Now we have remote agent software. So we'll be covering that on the 2 green sessions coming up. We'll go through policy compliance again. It's been quite popular. And I want to talk about the 2025 roadmap coming up as well. One or two more quick things. And honestly, if there's any questions, guys, please let me know. If not, we finish early. The recording is there to share. I always say as well, make sure and sign up for the webinars if you can. Because even if you can't attend, you'll still get the video and the slides afterwards, okay? Let's see. So version 8, if you've seen some of the emails we've sent out recently, version 7.3 was really our kind of last one. Like we've pushed a lot of updates since version 7, an awful lot. Really cool stuff and fixed some stuff along the way. We're always fixing bugs, right? So, I won't say any more about that. Right there on the screen is a little peek of version 8. It's about 50% done. In fact, I could release V8 core tomorrow and it would be fully functional with the new user interface. We're probably going to release the 2 of them together, but it is only 50% done. So the new interface, really, here's the principal thing. 2 kind of key principles of version 8. And I'm trying to avoid getting too technical, but the interface on V7 is great. It's actually from Red Hat. It's their user interface. It's open source, free to use. We've been using it since version 5. No issues. It's a bit cumbersome to work on. The new user interface is very, very rapid for us to work on. So that's number 1. And so we should see features flip faster with the new user interface. But also the current interface, in my mind, and it's lovely and it's really nice and it feels like an enterprise interface and all that, right? But it's a bit boxy. It's kind of, I do something here and then I have to come back out and I do something over there and I have to come back out and do. I prefer a much more fluid flowing workflow. And I'll give you a tiny example. It's like if I'm in a device and I don't have a category or a command group created, I'd like to do one just there and then populate the device with that command group immediately. We could do that on V7, but trust me, it's a bit of work with the back end. On version 8, it's not only minutes for us to do it, but the whole flow from your guys' perspective is just elegant. Like I can't get this out soon enough, all right? But it will take a couple of months. So version 8 will bring some of the key things that all you guys have been asking for and a lot more. So lots more to come on that in the next couple of months. Okay. Any feedback on the new logo, by the way? You like it? Colors? You know, maybe it's a bit much. Okay. Is there any questions or feedback on any of that stuff today? That was it. That was everything I wanted to get through. Anything at all? If not, nice short webinar. We'll definitely be sharing this. It'll be up on YouTube. It'll be in your inboxes, all that kind of fun stuff. Last calls for feedback. Perfect. Guys, thanks so much. I hope you have a nice day. And we'll see you on the next one.